and welcome to the Gamer's Closet. I'm your host, Douglas Weed, and today we're going to be discussing The Sinking of the Titanic board game. It's a board game from 1976, manufactured by Ideal Incorporated. It was branded as a family game, even though it's about a naval tragedy and disaster where thousands of people died. But why not? So, the game itself is a dice and movement game that does have a nice sinking ship mechanic to it. It is a lesser-known game due to the fact that the game was recalled due to a lawsuit by multiple Titanic survivors and their families. The game itself plays through about an hour, if that. It plays up to 2 to 4 players, and it does have a nice competitive edge to it. But let's dig into it a little further, shall we? You play as a ship's officer on the sinking Titanic, where you have to go to passenger staterooms and gather passengers, gather crates of food and casks of water, and then make your escape from the sinking ship. Go out onto the ocean itself, fight against other players in the oceans and also on the subsequent islands nearby, and wait until the rescue ship shows up to save you. The game comes with multiple pieces, which includes island and sea adventure cards, a stack of player cards with corresponding room numbers on their backs, comes with 4 player pawns, 5 food and water tokens of each color, 2 clips to hold both board pieces together, 6 lifeboats, and 2 dice. The ship will move slowly over time into the lower portion of the board where the rescue ship will then show up. You will have to maneuver through the hallways on the ship, but bulkheads eventually will block your path, especially if they go under the water line, while the ship does sink over time. Ideal was eventually sued by multiple Titanic survivors and their families due to the insensitive nature of this game. Ideal did rebrand this game in the United Kingdom as Abandoned Ship, which all they did was take the word Titanic off of the box and all of the branding on the board. The rest of the pieces, parts, and everything else were left the same. Players roll the dice to determine who goes first. Whoever has the highest roll goes first, then takes their turn, then play passes to the left. On their turn, players roll both dice and may move any number of spaces up to the total showing on the dice, but you do not have to take your full dice roll. Players move along passageways, the spaces with small dots, while attempting to reach staterooms, which are numbered spaces. Water spaces are the green dots, food spaces are the blue dots, and the start space counts as 1 space if moved through after the first turn. Players may never move diagonally, and a player may never end their turn on a space occupied by another player, but you may move through their space. A bulkhead, which is the thick black line on the board, may not be moved through as they separate passageways, except if you roll a double, then you may move through any one bulkhead one time only. The Titanic starts to sink after each player has taken their first turn. Then the Titanic sinks 1 mark for each 1 or 6 rolled. A player sinks the Titanic by advancing the white arrow on the back of the ship from mark to mark. He must advance the arrow before moving his play piece. It's important to know that if he moves his playing piece first, he loses his turn and must return it to the space where he started his turn, then advance the arrow. Note, anytime a 1 and a 1, a 6 and a 1, or a 6 and a 6 is rolled, the Titanic sinks 2 marks. To collect food and water tokens, a player must end their turn on a blue spot for a water token or a green spot to pick up a food token. Please note that there is no cap on how many you can pick up, but there are only 5 tokens available for each type that you can carry. The number on the passenger card indicates the stateroom of the passenger that the player is assigned to rescue. Note that each stateroom has a defined entryway which must be used upon entering or leaving said stateroom. A player, upon reaching his assigned stateroom, rescues the passenger and turns the card face up. That card now belongs to them. You then draw another card, which is your next assignment, which you will then proceed to that stateroom on your next turn. You do not have to go back to start. Some staterooms contain multiple passengers. If you do have to rescue one of those and you're already in that stateroom, you must leave that stateroom and come back in on your next turn to rescue that passenger. If a newly assigned stateroom is already under the waterline, return it to the bottom of the deck and draw another card. Should an assigned stateroom sink under the waterline before you get to it, then put that card at the bottom of the deck and draw another card. Once you've had enough, you may abandon your current stateroom assignment and proceed by dice roll to a lifeboat. The passenger card for this assignment is returned to the bottom of the deck. It is not necessary to roll the exact number to enter a lifeboat. However, each lifeboat counts as a space. Lifeboats have a definite entryway, and each pair of lifeboats is separated by a bulkhead. You may punch through that bulkhead if you do roll doubles like before. Only one player piece may occupy a lifeboat. Players in a lifeboat waiting to be launched continue to roll the dice on their turn, but do not move. Their rolls still do affect the ship sinking. Lifeboats are launched one at a time as the ship sinks, and the lifeboat touches the edge of the lifeboat launch area, which is the dark blue space in the C zone. Occupied lifeboats are placed in the lifeboat launch area, where they remain until a player takes their turn. Any number of occupied lifeboats may be in the launching area at any given time. When an empty lifeboat is launched, it is immediately placed on the island in numerical order by one of the players. A player may be forced to leave the ship without a lifeboat. If this happens, you move your piece directly to the lifeboat launching area as soon as either one of two things happens. First, the last lifeboat is launched before you reach it, or two, the Titanic sinks past the center dot on the space that you occupy. A player forced to leave the ship in this way loses all of their passengers, food tokens, and water tokens. Cards are returned to the bottom of the deck, and food and water tokens are returned to their respective piles. While in a lifeboat on a C zone, you roll 2 dice. One dice is to move vertically, the other dice is to move horizontally in any direction you choose. You can never move diagonally. It is important to note that the number on the dice are always considered individual, never the total. When moving off the launch area, they may move any number of spaces surrounding the launch area as the first space of their move. If you roll a 1 or a 6, the Titanic still sinks as normal. A player who leaves without a lifeboat in the launching area is considered to be swimming. You roll 1 dice and move vertically or horizontally, but never diagonally. You may move your playing piece towards an island with a lifeboat. When you reach said island, you snap your piece into the lifeboat. If 2 or more players move towards the same island, the empty lifeboat belongs to the first player who reaches that island. The other player must go to a different island. It is not necessary to land on the island by exact count. A player swimming in a sea zone or on an island without a lifeboat cannot draw adventure cards. However, when you roll a 1 or a 6 on the dice, the Titanic still sinks as normal. You cannot rescue passengers, collect food or water tokens until you have a lifeboat, and you cannot move onto or through a space containing a lifeboat or playing piece. Players who arrive on an island in a lifeboat draw an island adventure card when they land. It is not necessary to land on an island by exact count. However, the number rolled must be high enough to allow the player to reach the island. Directions on the card must be followed. However, if a card states that the player loses something that they do not have, the card is then ignored. The card is then put back to the bottom of the deck. A player may move to and from the same island as many times as they wish. While in a sea zone, players draw sea adventure cards every time they roll a 1 on the dice. 2 cards are drawn if they roll double 1s. A player may choose on their turn to draw a sea adventure card instead of rolling the dice. Directions must be followed on said cards. However, if a card states that the player loses something they do not have, the card is ignored and the player puts that card back at the bottom of the deck. A player may not draw a sea adventure card while in a lifeboat launching area, or while swimming, or while on an island. A player who lands by an exact count on a space next to another player or between 2 players, except diagonally, may demand from each player one of the following: 1 passenger, 1 food token, or 1 water token that this player holds. This must be surrendered by the other player or players. This rule can be used to delay other players from boarding the rescue ship and winning the game. The rescue ship only appears after the Titanic has been completely sunk, so you no longer need the 1 or 6 rolled rule. Players cannot board the rescue ship or any of the 12 green spaces until the rescue ship is completely above the water line. In order to board the rescue ship, a player must land by an exact count on any of the rescue spaces. To win the game, you have to be the first player to board the rescue ship with at least 2 passengers, 2 food tokens, and 2 water tokens. Well, this has been an overview of the Sinking of the Titanic board game. It is a weird game. About a naval disaster, and yet it's family fun. So, if you've never played it before, I would recommend playing it, because it is, like I said, a weird game, and it has some really neat mechanics that I've never seen in another board game, especially with the sinking ship mechanics to it. If you can find a copy of it, it's a little rarer, so it goes anywhere on eBay from about $50 to $100. You can find a lot of copies that are missing pieces. So it's a little harder to find a complete one. But I would look around, and especially since they rebranded it as Abandoned Ship, it makes it even a little tougher. But I would honestly recommend playing this game if you never have. Well, that's it from us here at the Gamer's Closet. We'd like to thank you for checking out our video on the sinking of the Titanic board game from Ideal Incorporated. If there is a game that you'd like us to review or discuss in the future, please put it in the comments below, and please hit the subscribe button so you can check out our future content. And always, please have a great gaming day.